Hey folks, Matthew Weiss here, WeissAdvice.com and WeissAdvice here on YouTube. In this video, I want to do some experimenting with microphone modeling software. The idea behind microphone modeling software is to model a microphone, get a flat response, and then take that flat response and convert it to another modeled microphone. So basically, it's taking one microphone and making it sound like another. So in other words, let's say we have a Neumann KM184 and we have a Shure SM58. In theory, if this software were working perfectly and actually did exactly what it aspired to do, we would be able to make one sound like the other, make the KM184 turn into the SM58 and vice versa perfectly. So I'm going to do some experimenting to see how accurately some of this software actually works, and maybe talk about some of the practical uses, and investigate just like how useful this stuff really is and what we can do with it. Alright, so to start this off, I have my friend and production partner Joe playing acoustic guitar here. He is mic'd up with a KM184 from Neumann and an SM58 from Shure. One is a small diaphragm condenser microphone, the other one is a small diaphragm dynamic microphone. They sound pretty darn different. So let's start by just listening to what those sound like flat out. Alright, here's our KM184. Not bad. Here is our Shure SM58. So pretty darn different sounding. I would say first and foremost, there's just a very dramatic difference in frequency response. The KM184, while it's a little bit low heavy, is generally pretty even across the spectrum. The Shure SM58, definitely not so much. It's dipped in the lows, it's very forward in the upper mids, the high end sounds all sorts of crazy, so it's a completely different world in terms of frequency response. The other thing that I'm noticing, which is maybe not quite as noticeable as frequency response, is the transient response. If we listen to the KM184, we can really picture the accurate thickness of the strings, whereas if we listen to the Shure SM58, it almost feels like the strings are thicker or heavier. Listen to that real quick. Really focus on the dynamic here, the sound of the strings. The 184, here's the 58. Notice that the strings sound noticeably more percussive. It's almost as if the strings are like heavier. There's like a longer duration during the attack phase of the sound, which completely changes the texture. By the way, I kind of like the SM58. I think for like sort of like a lo-fi sound, it's kind of cool. Just mentioning that as an aside. So, okay. The KM184 I would definitely put into the more hi-fi category, so I want to start by trying to go from a more hi-fi microphone to a more lo-fi microphone and see how accurately we can go. So what we're listening for is a bit of the upper mid, right, like where the upper mid meets the treble, to come forward a little bit. We want to hear some like weird kind of frequency response just changing in the top end. We want to hear some of the lows dip out a little bit. Let's give that a listen. Here's our before. So I think the idea is kind of there, although I don't think it's pulling the upper mids forward enough. To me, it feels like it's kind of going in the direction of the 58, but it's not completely getting there. Let's go back to our actual 58. one more time back to the 184 with the Antares Mic Mod Classic Microphone Modeler on. It's also pulling out too much lows. So I think it's kind of doing what we would expect, but so not quite getting there in my mind. Okay, let's go from the 58 now. This should be a real interesting trick here. Can we go from a more lo-fi sound to a more hi-fi sound? So here we're going to go from the Shure SM58 to the KM184. And I would expect that that mid-range would balance, the lows would come forward, and the top ends should even out and have a smoother response, if this works the way we would hope it would work. So before and after. Not bad. Actually kind of worked better going this direction. There are a couple of things that I feel aren't completely right. First of all, there's a broadband mid-range saturation that becomes obvious that simply does not go away even when the frequency response evens out a little bit. I feel like the lows did not extend in quite as full of a way as I would have hoped for. Maybe if we push the proximity up a little bit, it'll be better. Not bad. It's a little bit, the actual texture of the lows is not quite as good. It's a little bit kind of woofier, but it does actually get the lows there. And the top end, like the super treble range, does smooth out a little bit. Is it as smooth as the actual KM84? No, I don't think so. Let's jump back to the actual KM84 184 real quick. And now to the mic modded version of the 58. Not bad, but doesn't really quite do the trick again. So it works, but not super accurately. Okay, let's try it with a different software this time. Let's see if we can go... Well, this isn't going to work. Let's go using Lava, which is an Acoustica plugin. Let's see if we can get the Shure SM58, right? So we go over here, Shure SM58. Cool. Can we get it to sound like a Neumann KM184? All right. Cool. So let's do a before and after. So I would say it's further off than Antares was. This doesn't really sound like a KM184 at all, but it does have a very interesting sound. I will give credit where credit is due. It is a really cool lo-fi sort of sound that we're getting here. And I think we're going to circle back to that idea a little bit later. Now, I don't have an SM58 in Lava here, but we do have a Shure SM7B, and I think if you are familiar with the SM7B, it's got a very distinctly neutral sound. So in theory, we should be able to take this KM184 and get a very neutral response from it using this Shure SM7B setting. So before. After. That's actually not bad. I want to try one other thing. I want to see if I can get this to go from a microphone that I like on acoustic guitar to a microphone that I love on acoustic guitar. So I don't have a Microtech Geffel M300, but I do have the Schoeps M22-1F. This is a really, really cool small diaphragm condenser. So in theory, this should give us a really, really well-balanced, even sound with a lot of detail and definition if it works accurately. Before. think there's a little bit of a level mismatch, but that's actually pretty darn good. So let's knock the level down a couple dB and go from a before and after like that. After. That's actually genuinely not bad. It's not quite as spot on as what I would hope for, but it actually performs pretty well to what I would imagine it would sound like. So, okay, from the point of view of actually literally turning one microphone into another, how do I feel this software is doing between Antares and Acoustica? If I'm being honest, I would say maybe like a 6 out of 10, 6.5 out of 10. It's performing better than I would expect, but it's not really getting it in any kind of an accurate way, at least not from these examples. Now, I do want to point out another practical reason to use this kind of software, right? The first one being, trying to make a cheaper microphone more expensive, right? But let's say we were using microphones that are in the same family, but just weren't like the ideal microphone for the exact source. So in other words, what if we had a vocalist, for example, who delivered in a way where we only have one microphone available, but a different microphone of a similar family would work? You know what? Instead of trying to explain this, let me just give the actual example. So I have a 251 clone here. This is very accurate to what an actual Ayla M251 sounds like, except the low mids are a little bit more scooped in this microphone than in the actual 251, but it's not even by a lot, so it's very, 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 very close. And then I have a Neumann U87. So a Neumann U87 is going to pull the front of face tones of a vocal forward. There's a bump in that 1.5 kilohertz range, and if you happen to have a very forward voice, which I already naturally do, it will exaggerate and exasperate that. A 251 kind of does the opposite. It sort of dips that range around 2K and then kind of gives you a little bit of extra shininess in the very top treble end and gives you a little bit of extra love in the lows. And so it's really good for vocalists who have very bright voices or front of face voices. So what I've done here, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to be singing, so brace yourselves. I really wish I was a good singer one day. So what I've done here is I've sang wrong for the microphones. I've sang with extra front of face tone into the U87, and I've recessed my voice and removed that front of face tone in my delivery in the 251. So ideally, the way I'm singing into the U87 here, I would have recorded myself with the 251. And the way I'm singing into the 251 here, ideally, I should have recorded with the U87. So we're going to see if we can go from one to the other and correct these issues using this microphone modeling technology. First, let's just listen to my wonderful singing voice, and I will hear nothing else to any other extent, just how I sang and how the recording sounds. You know how I feel, and it's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me. Right, so especially on the word life, we hear that very front of face tone. Definitely could chill out. All right, now let's hear the 251. You know how I feel, and it's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me. Right, so I'm trying to sort of swallow my voice on that one a little bit, take away that nose tone and that nose pinch. So the 251 capture here is not terrible sounding on me, because even when I recess my voice, I have such a front of face tone that the 251 still does okay by suppressing some of that. So it's not terrible. The 87 I really don't like on my voice. I think it's just way too front of face forward, the way I'm singing and the way it sounds and my natural voice. So let's see if we can smooth out the 87 using the 251 emulation. Before, you know how I feel, and it's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life. After, you know how I feel, and it's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life. So it actually kind of works. Listen to this tone. You know how I feel. Like in how I feel. That listen to that with the 251 on. You know how I feel. It's a little suppressed. It's a little smoothed out. Before. You know how I feel. And it's a new dawn. It's a new day. It's after. You know how I feel. And it's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life. It doesn't take it away completely, like that is how I'm singing, right? It's not going to change that, but it softens it a little bit. And so this is doing an okay job. Not quite as far as what I would hope, but about as far as it's going to get. Let's go the other direction now. Let's go from the 251 to the U87. This is where I'm singing a little too softly. You know how I feel. And it's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life. Okay, with the 87 on. You know how I feel. And it's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life. So I actually really like this. It's subtle. It's a little subtler than what I would expect from an 87. Let me push the input a little bit. Maybe we can get something that's a little bit better. Maybe give myself a little bit more space from the mic, see if that kind of works. But it is pulling that front of face tone forward just a little bit, and I think actually for the way that I'm singing, this ends up working out really well. And I think that this is actually a better starting place from a mix perspective than if I were to leave it off. You know how I feel. And it's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life. One more time without. Let's just go from that scale. And it's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life. And it's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life. I also noticed the quintessential Neumann saturation tone, that like little bit of grain has shown up, which I think is kind of neat too. So from this point of view, I think that this actually is a fairly practical software and can be used to an extent to kind of correct for a not ideal mic choice. I don't think it's going to work as well. Like, I mean, we heard the example. It doesn't work as well when you're going from completely different microphones, one to the other. That's a stretch. But when we're within the similar family, we can get from one to the other fairly similarly, and it kind of works. Now, I want to go to one other thing, which is using it creatively, which I think actually has a lot of merit to. So this is where the fun stuff happens. Instead of trying to go to a U87 and just correct my voice, let's try to go to something totally crazy. Let's go to like an old microphone. So let's go to like an old Philips microphone here on the 251, and let's go to like a ribbon microphone of some sort. Let's go to let's go to a Biodynamic right here, M81. So these are like vintagey, vibey kind of microphones. Let's hear what that sounds like. Here's our Philips. You know how I feel, and it's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for... Yeah, like what an interesting sound, right? Wind drifting on by, you know how I feel. It sounds kind of like I recorded on an old broadcast microphone. Let's try the 87 going into this ribbon. You know how I feel. And it's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me. Yeah, I really dig that, actually. I'm going to set this other one to the same microphone. Let's play around with some ribbons. Let's start at the beginning here, from the 87 going through a ribbon emulation. Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. That's kind of cool. Let's try the 251 here. Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. I love that. Actually, that is great. First of all, it's masking some of the flaws in my singing, which, God bless it. Second of all, It sounds like it was recorded on a vintage microphone. It's much more convincing than doing like some kind of saturation and filter effect, you know, cutting highs, cutting lows, and then adding a little bit of saturation, right? That's the vintage vibe formula. This is giving me a much more convincing version of like, oh, it really sounds like I recorded on an old ribbon microphone. And so out of all of the reasons to use this software, this is my pick. This is what I like about it. And I think for this reason, it actually becomes worth the price of admission, because we can start to create something that musically functions in a fun and interesting way, and I can see a lot of practical application for this in creative mixing. So I think I'm going to wrap up there. That's my thoughts on this tech. I think it's got a ways to go in terms of the actual goals it's trying to accomplish, but in terms of a creative effect, I think it's really, really great. But yeah, let's wrap on up. If you like this video, hit that like button. If you want to catch more videos like this, hit subscribe with the bell notification. If you want to get a really comprehensive education when it comes to recording, mixing, mastering, and music production, check out WeissAdvice.com. I'll put a link to that in the description below. And lastly, you know what we say. We are musicians, sound is our instrument, and I will catch you next time.